Welcome back to the PC Perspective Podcast. We're at episode 697. This is being recorded on October 12, 2022. I'm Sebastian Peak.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
I'm Brett Franz Brunberg.
And I'm Kent Burgess.
We have a lot to talk about, but first, let's do some housekeeping. You can help support the site, keep this going at patreon.com/PCPer. We may have mentioned this a few hundred times, but we're just going to throw it out there again. And this week we want to shout out to Giga and Justin O. Thank you very much.
Oh.
And to all of our regulars as well, of course, keeping this going. Now, let's shift immediately to the Food with Josh segment. I don't know if it's a burger, what it's going to be. Take it away.
It's a little crazy. It was called the GQ burger. No, GQ beef. I don't know what GQ stands for, but here's what it was. It was a single burger patty with Philly sirloin meat, mushrooms, bell peppers, caramelized onions, queso, bacon, and finally topped with A1 sauce. This was a whopping $13.99 burger, packed to the brim with things that will probably cause my gout to inflame. But is it worth it? You bet it. You bet your bippy it did. Was. Look, even that bun's a little buttered on there. You see that? Yeah. This is a full meal deal. This is the real thing. Fries were good too. So everything in that is goodness and light. And, the A1 really brought it together. Made it a, kind of less dry, more interesting type thing. And this was definitely this is a burger that you had to have a knife and a fork. You just couldn't pick it up. It just doesn't work that way. Physics doesn't work in this universe to allow such activities. So, yeah, it was tasty. It was a lot, and I'm skipping dinner and breakfast tomorrow.
Let's move on to our lead story, which is, of course, the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4090 Founders Edition review. We got this card in advance and had some time to test it on a brand new platform, which, of course, there's going to be some growing pains there and probably have to retest everything that I present in this review. But we did put this new card on a AM5 system with the 7950X. And it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. It seems to be breaking things. It's so fast. I don't know. But it's, in case you haven't been following the saga, through all the rumors, it was supposed to be this crazy thing that was going to require you to have dedicated circuits or run it off your dryer outlet. And in the end, it was a card that has the same total board power rating as the 3090 Ti at 450 watts. Costs $400 less than the theoretical MSRP of the 3090 Ti. Same.
Do you know what's really fascinating?
Huh? What?
About it? Are you ready for me?
I'm ready, Josh.
Okay, we'll put that back up.
Okay. You talk about transistor count?
Mm-hmm. I do. So, yeah, they went from a Samsung 8 nanometer, which really was not kind of 8 nanometer. And the old one was 28.3 billion and a larger die size. This is more than double the transistor. So your density is decreasing significantly, and it's a smaller die size. So it's that specialty TSMC 4 nanometer NV, which is in actuality based on TSMC 5 nanometer. But yeah, at first I thought it was pretty high priced, and it is, because not everybody can afford a $1,600 video card. But you got to think that masks themselves for these, and you have to have multiple sets of masks to do the lithography. They're essentially 100 million a piece. I mean, stuff has gotten crazy expensive. They're just these blocks of quartz that have a big chip on them that they put in the litho machine and do the light waves through to do the photoresist. It's nuts, and it has to be perfectly clear, and they're a big chunk. And yeah, $100 million just for masks.
And
That's
another
nuts.
100 million for that machine from ASML or whoever makes it.
Oh well, yeah, that consumes the amount of power of a small town. 1,500 to 3,000 people, I think, and that's how much power just one EUV. So, producing things is not inexpensive. Designing it, again, not inexpensive. And I would love to have seen it at $1,000, maybe 1,100, but no. I mean, the performance is. Well, we'll get into that.
Yeah, let's quickly go over the specs for the audio listeners. It's the first Ada Lovelace GPU being released to the public. It's AD102. Has 128 SMs enabled. That gives you 16,384 CUDA cores, up from 10,752 with the 3090 Ti. And tensor core counts 512, RT core is 128. So it should be significantly more powerful just looking at this with both raster and ray traced operations. And then the base clock is 2235. Boost clock is 2520 megahertz. Of course, it'll opportunistically boost higher, theoretically, depending on your power limit and voltage and all of that. Same memory system as the 3090 Ti. What is different about this is the level 2 cache with Ada Lovelace is significantly bigger. So it's not on the table above, but the cache size, the L2 cache moves from about 6 megabytes with the 3090 Ti to 70 megabytes with the 4090. So, we saw how big a boost in performance you could get from cache with the RX 6000 series. So that's an interesting data point there from NVIDIA. And the card itself, of course, there was all these jokes about how big it is, and it's just this massive thing, and it takes up, it's a 3-slot design, and it does require a lot of power, but it's not anywhere, it's no different really than the 3090 Ti. So this is not new territory. It's just that maybe momentary / transient power, the spikes might be harder on a PSU. I went to the Be Quiet site. They had this thing on the RTX 40 series. Do I need a new power supply? And it talks about it. And of course, the GPU itself, by the Founders Edition, comes with a Sense cable that goes out to 4 PCIe 8 pins. And it actually manages the load between the cables, which is rather interesting. I think it was Gerbauer who was kind of talking about that, like how the load was distributed over the cables. And I think Steve at Gamers Nexus was talking about that too. So it actually
so you don't end up with just one red one?
What's that? Was that a
due to overheating.
Yeah.
Due to overheating.
Actually, it apparently does a remarkable job. I don't think I've ever seen Steve more calm and almost complimentary than when he was talking about how well behaved the card is.
The interesting thing I found about the power draw, and both Gerbauer and Igor's lab hit on this, is that it pulls almost nothing from the PCI slot itself.
Yeah, 10 watts.
It's so a lot of folks who were, looking forward and getting motherboards with additional 6-pin power to feed the PCI slot, and now it's not using any at all.
Yeah. Which is really the way it should be, because then you don't have to worry about how robust the PCI power delivery is.
And we don't have to try and figure out how much wattage is being pulled from the PCIe slot again.
Yeah. Yeah, for those interstitial, like the thing that Alan made with the mess of wires coming off of it. But that was a different time and a different vendor. Anyway, like I mentioned, the test platform for our testing, and of course there's a ton of reviews. This was not a limited release to media. There's a lot of launch reviews out there. Pick your favorite. I did something a little different to try to help differentiate us, but we'll talk about that as well. So it's the 7950X stock. So I didn't do any of the PBO tuning or anything like that. The Meg X670E Ace motherboard from MSI running V1.25 beta BIOS, which is still the latest release. That's AGESA 1.0.0.3 patch A. And rebar was enabled, of course. So then you have 32 gigs of DDR. I wrote DDR4. It's DDR5 6000 CL30. Be Quiet sent over a Dark Power Pro 12 1500 watt power supply, which ended up being massive overkill. And I'm running Windows 11 Pro. I didn't write it here, but it's 22H1, not H2. And every card tested was actually all on the new press driver, 521.90. And the first result, it basically says it all. So I tested the 2080 Ti over again, 3080 Ti, a 3090, and then the 4090. I don't have a 3090 Ti, or I would have included it. And I don't have a 6900 XT or a 6950 XT. So I just thought, you know what? I don't even have the fastest cards from AMD. I'm just going to compare RTX cards since the launch of RTX with the 2080 Ti. So the performance is almost double in TimeSpy Extreme. It goes from a score of 10,515 with our factory overclocked RTX 3090, which is the MSI Supreme, all the way up to 19,325. And this is just the graphics score. And I thought, oh, I just ran TimeSpy like an idiot. I'll go back and run TimeSpy Extreme. And then I did, and then it was the same score. So I moved on, and then the controversial Cyberpunk result I'll have first. I saw LTT, there's going to be a correction or a video update coming because the Linus Tech Tips review had this enormous result from Cyberpunk, which they said they triple checked because it didn't make any sense. What I've noticed is that Cyberpunk has become very difficult to rely on because starting with version 1.60, there were some changes made. Even if you're using the canned benchmark, even if you're using preset settings, there are sub-settings, there are sliders that are all different from 1.52 to 1.60. So I think that might have thrown some people off. You use the same setting, and your game auto updated, and you're using the Steam version of the game, and now your benchmark is different. Your results are higher or lower depending on what you're doing, which version you're running. I manually adjusted things and tried to match 1.52, and then I finally just gave up. So when I retested Cyberpunk with these 4 cards, it was all with exactly the same settings on the same system. All I did was power the system down, swap video cards, reboot, fire the game back up, and benchmark again. So it should be a perfect comparison between these cards, but I think the frame rates might have been influenced by AMD FSR, which is enabled by default, apparently even when you turn it off. I turned it off. I see like Hardware Unboxed, who at 2560 by 1440 is getting like 100 and something, 110, 120 max. And I'm at 184.71 at 3440 by 1440. And that was this point of differentiation. I thought, hey, this ultra wide thing is kind of a PC exclusive thing. And why not test at a high resolution ultra wide? This is less demanding than 4K. So I thought, hey, I'll get really high frame rates, saturate this 144 hertz monitor, which I did in some tests. But in this one, 1% lows were still below that 115.60. But again, there might be some kind of resolution scaling going on in the background. It was on. I turned it off. I hit apply. I ran the benchmark. I've restarted the game a bunch of times, and who knows? So this could be erroneous, but Metro Exodus doesn't have that issue, and it was almost double as well. You went from 52 frames a second with the 3090 to 94 frames per second with the 4090. Again, 3440 by 1440, highest detail settings. Yes, Josh.
The difference between a 3080 Ti and a 3090 is kind of embarrassing. So I feel bad for all those people. The 3090 came down to $1,100 and you bought one. Feels bad, man.
I constantly reference Bauer, but he's the only tech tuber I watch. Sorry. He's been saying for a long time, like the 3080 Ti is the highest it makes any sense to go. 3090 didn't
really
make sense. 3090 Ti made less.
The regular 3080 12G is $200 less, $300 less, and the
Ti doesn't give you that much.
Not much. I mean, it's a few more shaders, but yeah, you expand the memory bus, and you have 12 gigs. Problem solved.
I feel kind of bad for the folks that bought a 3090 Ti in March of this year.
Yes.
Painful. Super painful.
for $2,000.
They had to know. I mean, you knew 40 series cards were coming, and you made that choice. You bought that $2,000 card, or $3,000, or whatever you paid for.
Yeah, but they were going to make it Mac mining, so they didn't worry about it.
Yeah. By the way, I looked up the 4090 earlier, and I put it into the nice hash profitability calculator, and just whatever the defaults were for energy cost, it came back with a result of negative 84 cents a day. So mining is dead. It's dead. That's a beautiful thing.
Thank goodness.
Dirt 5, Josh, I did a little ultra wide racing, ultra preset, everything turned up, native resolution. I turned off any kind of resolution scaling.
You know what makes me sad about Dirt 5? It actually looks worse than Dirt Rally 2.0, which is like a 3-year older title.
It looked pretty good when I had everything turned on and the ray traced reflections turned on. Wasn't bad.
And they've got all kinds of things too. Like, they've got the resolution scaling, and it's it's a pretty advanced little engine for getting the most performance and best looking stuff. But I don't think they worked as hard on the art assets as
well. It looks
they
like
did.
a console game, Josh. I think it looks pretty much the same on the PS5 as it does on the PC.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, same kind of deal, same performance boost. Basically, looking at this chart, looks like the 3D Mark times by Extreme chart again. It goes from 122 frames per second with 3090 all the way up to 206 with the 4090. And then I started doing some RTX DLSS testing, and I went back to the old Bright Memory Infinite benchmark from a couple of years ago. Ran that at native resolution, so 3440 by 1440. Did the very high setting for ray tracing. I set DLSS to quality, and it jumped from the 3090's 64.64 frames per second on average to 112.75 with the 4090. But the 1% lows weren't any better. In fact, they were about a frame and a half worse. So clearly their driver, the press driver, was not optimized for Bright Memory Infinite. But that's the kind of thing that will improve over time. Any of the 1% lows that were wonky, I'm sure will get addressed with future driver updates if it's an important enough title. And here's Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition. Again, 3440 by 1440 Extreme preset, which is just mean. This is very, very hard on a GPU. And I had DLSS set to balanced. And just to give you an idea of the performance, say you have a 2080 Ti. You can get about 55 frames per second on this ultra-wide monitor in this game at these settings. It was just very respectable, especially if it's like a FreeSync monitor and you don't have any screen tearing or anything, even though it's sub 60. Okay, fine. 3080 Ti takes you well over 60. You're at an average of 76 frames per second. And then the 4090, you're at almost 120 frames per second, with your 1% lows being over 60. So this is the card to get for like 120 hertz gaming at really high settings on an ultra wide. And in some cases, you can even do, 144 or more. And that's when we get into the whole frame generation thing. There's another Cyberpunk result that could be meaningless. Who knows? By the way, this result is more in line with what other people were getting, but I have the RT Ultra preset, which is different from the Ultra preset. So I also wonder if there was maybe some confusion about that.
The thing about Cyberpunk in the settings is that there are certain settings that you actually have to leave the game for the settings change to take effect.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if everybody doing the Cyberpunk test is aware of that. I know if you activate or deactivate DLSS, you have to actually restart the game for that change to take effect. And I've found that to be true in several games that use DLSS. Control was the same way. If you turned on or off DLSS, you had to restart the game. And so I wonder if some of the odd numbers in Cyberpunk are coming from people staying in the game, running a benchmark, turning DLSS off, running it again without restarting the game.
Yeah, could be. It doesn't prompt you to. Some games do. Like when I was testing Flight Simulator, it might shock you to know this, but Flight Simulator, the latest game from Microsoft, is a DX11 title with beta DX12 support. And then on top of that...
This is not shocking.
we were given a press driver, which was a different branch that also offered DLSS 3 capabilities. But so this chart is annoying to me to look at because my DLSS didn't really do anything, even though I was restarting after enabling it. So it went from 74 frames per second on average to 76. There's something wrong there. When I turned on DLSS 3.0 performance mode with frame generation enabled, it took things up from that 74 to 76 frames per second level to 156.9 with 1% lows of 86.76. Now, obviously, you're rendering half as many frames, so it essentially doubles whatever DLSS would be giving you. If you're going to do this, the concern is, of course, going to be visual fidelity. And I have not looked at any of the reviews where they've done any kind of DLSS 3.0 deep dives, if anybody has yet, where they look at still images and try to point out the difference between frame generation on versus off, or talk about any kind of visual artifacts or anything related to that. I didn't see anything. Just to the naked eye sitting here at 144 hertz monitor, it looked completely normal. I wasn't seeing any kind of, like the jello motion or the soap opera effect, anything that I would normally attribute to frame interpolation on a TV. There was none of that. It just looked buttery smooth and was at a very high frame rate. Because, for example, in Cyberpunk, my 1% lows were still above the 144 refresh rate of the monitor. And it's a FreeSync monitor, so it'll go below, and I won't see tearing, but it was just fantastic. It looked great. I was staring at the monitor up close, trying to see, maybe the clouds look a little wonky, but then the clouds looked wonky anyway. So I couldn't quite tell, if there was shimmering on the edges of the clouds. The plane was perfect. The buildings all looked the same. The water looked the same. So I don't know. And that was in Flight Simulator. In Cyberpunk, it looked identical. But who knows? Because maybe my other Cyberpunk testing was with some kind of AMD resolution scaling going on in the background all the time anyway. But we've talked about the power a little bit. The clocks are quite high. They were close to 2800 megahertz, 2.76 or something, 2.75 gigahertz. And board power draw, even when I ran Metro Exodus at 3440, 1440 Extreme, it was 436 watts at the board, 648 at the wall. I didn't make one of those traditional wall power charts, but I have some notes here I can pull up on my notepad here. The 3090, under the same circumstances, was pulling 616 at the wall, and the 3080 Ti was pulling 553 at the wall.
So not horrific.
No, it's 30 watts more than the 3090 Supreme that we have. It's pretty darn good for this level of performance, but something that Kent alluded to earlier comes into play, because if you start talking about efficiency, it stops making as much sense for them to have gone as big as they did with the power limits, because you gain so little by having the power draw at 450 watts, and I'm sure even less by going up to 600 like you can with some partner cards with the plus 133 power limit. It's I'll bring up the Gerbauer video, because of course the launch day he had something a lot different than most to talk about.
I was going to bring that up. It's really interesting what he came up with.
So we'll just look at his chart here. He had a power target test he put together, and you can see the 100, here he has it highlighted, 100% power limit, and his relative frames per second. And there's a sweet spot down much lower, where you don't really need to exceed 70, 80% power target to get most of the same performance. The sweet spot is actually at 50%, but to get within 5% of the performance, you don't need to go anywhere near as high with power. And I'll just skip ahead here, because he has some results here with the power limit. So his estimate here, at 60% power target, you lose 10% of performance, but a third of the power draw. And putting that into some results here. Here's PUBG, so 4K esports settings, as he put it. Power drops from 423 to 283. You only lose 5% of your frames per second. And then he also retested, I think it was Cyberpunk. Yeah, Cyberpunk at 4K Ultra went from 139 frames per second with 330 watts to 136. That's only 3 frames per second less, or minus 2%. And power draw went down to like 270 watts. And he ended up doing some like curve editing and stuff and trying to make this like to on a more granular level, but it ended up just being just the power target. Just set the power limit down in your software, like Afterburner or whatever you're using, and you'll see virtually no discernible performance hit, but you'll draw like a third less power. So it just reminded me of the 7950X, because the 7950X is so aggressive with voltage and power. If you drop the voltage just a little bit, if you have a well enough binned CPU to do that, and then you lower the power limits, you get all the performance with way less power draw and significantly lower temperatures. And as impressive as the thermals were on this card, and they are very impressive. Watch the Gamer's Nexus video where he does all of his temperature probes and stuff, but it's like 60 to 70 degrees Celsius all the time under load, and it's not loud. And it would be even better if you just lowered the voltage a little bit or lowered the power limit a little bit. Although Gebauer did say that performance was never capped by thermals, of course, or power. Even when he increased the power limit, he was always voltage limited. So unless there's going to be some workaround to unlock the voltage on the card, he said there was no software or anything that could do it, at least not yet.
Yeah, he in his add-in board partner video that he released today, he looked at a couple of other cards, and it's the same way there. They have a hardware limited voltage of 1.05 volts. And to override that, it's going to have to be external add-ons, completely hard modding the boards, because NVIDIA has put a hard cap on their own and their the add-in board partners' control of voltage.
Yeah, they're running these things at the ragged edge, like all silicon people, AMD, Intel with their next gen stuff coming up here shortly. You know, they've got so much feedback internally to the chip and aggressive power gating that, that last 5% of performance, it's taken an extra 30% of power. But they're willing to do that because benchmarks, and they don't care how much power you consume at home.
They were tired of the overclocker stealing all of the thunder, Josh. They're doing it themselves now, right out of the box.
But now it's the undervolter that's stealing the thing. Because if you have the latest Ryzen chips,
you have a point.
Right? Latest Ryzen chips, you undervolt them. The 4090, you undervolt it. This is the new sort of thing.
This is all
bizarre, but it works.
The RX 5000 series too. When I reviewed those a couple of years ago, there's like, did you undervolt? Do you have results with undervolting? Like, undervolting? What are you talking about? Like, how little I knew. That'll become the standard.
Yeah, I've had the Ryzen 5000 series. I had some great results in using the performance boost overdrive undervolting on several of those chips. Unfortunately, the 5800X that's in my wife's computer has apparently not been very well, because I could not get it to be stable with any undervolt at all. But undervolting is in a way the new overclocking. And if you want a quiet system, hell yeah.
All I gotta say is the kids these days, they just don't do things right anymore.
Well, wait until somebody comes up with a pencil mod for the 4090 to unlock the voltage.
I'll be happy again.
Then they will. By the way,
one of the headlines. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
One of the headline takeaways should be that the demise of the 750 to 800 watt power supply was called too soon.
Yeah, if you have a robust one, you need to have enough capacitance on the PS2 to give those that great transient response. It sounds like we're talking about amplifiers.
But we are talking about a little bit, just if you pull those voltage or the power draws just a little bit in, you're going to be so fine. You're going to be
if you drop this to like 80 or 90% power limit, I don't think you'd really see much of a performance hit at all. And then you could still use that older 850 watt power supply, I'm assuming.
Easy. Well, NVIDIA was recommending 850 on their 4090 Founders Edition. And several of the others add-in boards with their, like PNY, who always uses sort of a reference design on their boards. They're recommending 850. It's only Asus with their Strix card and a couple of the Gigabyte RS card. They're recommending 1,000. And I want to say Zotac has one they're recommending like 1,200. But pretty much. Yeah, I think if you've got an 850 and you get the correct cable, you're going to be generally fine if you've got a good quality PSU.
Yeah, does your PSU have at least 4 separate 8 pins coming off of it? Then you'll probably be okay because it'll distribute the load across the 4. And if you've got 600 watts on tap at any given time, you'll be okay. What was max power?
I've got the power.
What's that?
I've got the power.
Good.
Power?
I think the highest draw I've seen anywhere so far was Steve at Gamers Nexus had 666 watts max, but that was running like torture tests, like he was doing Furmark.
He was running Furmark, and he had the power slider taken all the way up to 130%.
Right. So it's fan service basically at that point. It's totally unrealistic.
And there's really, and Der Bauer showed it in one of his charts, there was almost no performance benefit of pulling the power slider over that far.
Absolutely not, no.
Yeah.
In fact, like the end of his video was, the end of his launch day video with the Founders Edition was basically like, NVIDIA, come on, what are you doing? Like you're taking that last 5% that overclockers like him used to get by pumping up the power limits and increasing voltage and maybe even drawing 150, 200 watts over the rated TDP. But that's how it is out of the box.
Right.
You don't need that 150, 200 watts. Exactly. You don't need that last 5% of performance. But they're pushing things. Like what is the next Radeon going to be like that they had to push this hard for their 4090? It could be very competitive.
The implications of that question are very interesting.
Yes. So anyway, can you actually buy these things? When I click on the link to buy, of course, the Founders Edition is out of stock, but allegedly, these links say buy now. I wonder if they actually go to a real product.
They probably go to a secondary site that says you can get it from the here. Yeah.
Oh, I see. So let's see.
There you go.
Go to Best Buy.
So you can go to B&H or Best Buy.
They have the PNY at Best Buy. Waiting.
No, I think it was sold out earlier today.
Might be out of
Best Buy.
Sold out. Okay.
Sold out.
So they are sold out at that price. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there were already people on the Newegg secondary stores, partner stores, listing various 4090s for $2,500, $2,600.
Well, they were just frustrated that all the ARCs sold out, so they had to go buy something.
Right. And
so they just settled for a 4090.
Right.
I feel like that's a reasonable concession if you had your heart set on an A770. You're like, all right, well, at least the 4090 has AV1. Hey, if you want to measure this in a different way, and of course it's a hefty card. It's nearly 5 pounds with the adapter attached to it. FPS Review has this metric. It is less than 70 cents per gram.
Interesting.
So, I mean, you think about gold prices. This isn't that unreasonable. 70 cents a gram?
No. $315 a pound?
No, that's a very, very expensive steak, but, it's not a steak. It's a graphics card.
Getting on this topic of the price, and sort of going back to something Josh was talking about earlier about the price of, actually creating the wafers and the price of the, the development and the engineering. I was doing some research for another project a couple of weeks ago, and I found that apparently TSMC was charging for their 7 nanometer wafers. They were charging right about $9,000 a wafer. For their 4 nanometer wafers, they are charging just shy of $17,000 for the wafer. So that's a huge price increase for the manufacturing. You know, and it's going to lead to things being more expensive. I mean, that's the world we live in. You know, most of the world's neon, which is very important to creating wafers, comes from Ukraine, and it's really hard to get stuff out of there right now for some reason. So, I mean, yeah, it's expensive, but I don't know that it's as expensive as it could be, given the wafer itself costing almost twice as much. Yeah.
And when you're dealing with a big chip, your yields and bins are not going to be fantastic.
Right.
So, yeah, you're also dealing with that. And, yeah, I mean, the PCBs are probably the cheapest thing of that. I mean, it's going to be like a 12 or however many layer, and that'll be $5 to $10, you know, well, maybe a little bit more. But yeah,
and
you're talking about the rest of the components and the chip. It's big money.
And how much do the
and the cooler by itself is probably going to be $100.
Yeah. And how much do the 2 gigabyte GDR6X chips
24 gigabyte.
Well, you got 12 2 gigabyte chips.
Yeah.
Instead of the 24 1 gigabyte that we had on the 3090 and 3090 Ti.
This is the corporate apologist corner of the podcast.
Yes.
This is totally fair pricing. I understand why they're charging $1,600 for it. It makes perfect sense because of their research and development costs and all of that stuff.
They got to be able to make these, you know. Somebody's got to make some money here.
I don't think, honestly, that the 4090's pricing is the problem at all, because 3090 Ti was $2,000. This is $1,600. Okay. Yeah. The problem is going to be the 4080 situation. The 16
that's going to be a smaller chip. And yeah.
Well, that's the odd thing to me, is that the 4090 is the only one of these that is on the 102 chip. Everything else
until the 4090 Ti comes out, but yes.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Which will actually have the full
Titan
chip.
or whatever they call it.
All of it enabled.
Yeah.
So the real issue, as we've talked about before, is that the 30 series is still there. It's still in the supply chain. They still have them. And you don't want to undercut the price of the 3080. So instead of competing with it directly, what you've done is that you have basically put it into a lower segment of your product stack to have it at the $699 price point, and then you have the $899 price point with your new 4080, and then the $1199 price point for what should actually be the only 4080. So then you've got, I mean, who would buy a 4070 for $899 when you can get the 3080 for $699? Or find a 3080 12 gig that's going to get you basically the performance of a 3080 Ti almost. It's just, even though the performance is going to look really impressive in benchmarks, this would never have happened. We would have had the same kind of generational, like, massive uplift that we're seeing of up to 2x raster performance across the board, 3080 to 4080 and 3070 to 4070, all of that, except there's all these 3080s they need to sell, and you know, nobody's doing write downs and rebates. And
yeah, I'm looking at Amazon. The 3080 12 is still the lowest is $749, which, you know, not horrible, but at the same time, you would hope even on Prime Day. What's that?
I picked up a 3080 12 about 2 months ago, and it's still the same price as it was then.
How much was NVIDIA charging partners for those chips? I wonder. Because during the mining craze, MSRP was meaningless, and they could charge whatever they wanted because the board didn't sell any price.
It wasn't only the dollar figure; they were also forcing them to buy in a certain quantity at a certain price, which is why you're seeing so many still in the market, obviously. So they had to lock in order to get any allocation, they had to lock in at a quantity.
What is it? What they figured that gross margins for these board producers are like 7-8%.
Yeah.
So wasn't EVGA supposedly
even right
like
now
2? Yeah, some
very, very low number. Why they got out of the game.
And I seem to recall that as 30 series was originally coming, there were some stories about NVIDIA having to buy back a large number of 20 series chips from their board partners. And I just feel like maybe when this time came around, they refused to do that. I seem to have heard something like that. And that being one of the big reasons that EVGA did what they did.
Okay, here's a theory I just came up with. Imagine that the mining crash didn't happen because Ethereum didn't merge or whatever it's called, and that these cards are still unavailable. You could have launched the 40 series at the same price as the 30 series and talked about these huge improvements and how great it is. But then, of course, the actual market pricing of this would be a lot higher, and it wouldn't matter because the supply chain would take care of itself because you'd still be selling these things in mass quantities. Back when the 30 series launched, that was during the chip shortages and the mining craze. Yeah. So they didn't have to worry about it. They could even buy back chips because they were being resold as their, what was the mining series of GPUs.
Yeah.
We even saw them re-release the 2060 during that time and do some other things. So and
then at the same time do the low hash rate just to pretend that they cared too.
Yeah, we had the LHR stuff. That's true. So it's just it all seems to point to the mining crash as the reason why these are so expensive, I think. As crazy as that sounds. They would be more expensive to actually buy if mining was still a thing. But the list prices I don't think would be
a bit lower.
Yeah, because of this whole
whenever you've got movement of stock and you don't have anything in the warehouses just depreciating, then that's awesome for any kind of company. You got huge sell through, then profits will follow because you have no you have to stock things up and that costs money and then they sit there and that's money that's just sitting there and it's
it's a loss because you're paying for the space.
Yeah.
You're losing money every day on that.
Inventory.
Let's move on. We could talk about RTX 4090 all night, but we should move on because there was other important news. Noctua understands that processor hygiene is an important consideration when you're, building a new system and changing out your coolers. So they are offering a way to stop thermal paste buildup before it starts. Now, this was an issue for a lot of people. And it's something that I think there's no shame in admitting that you're slopping thermal paste all over the place. It's getting down the sides of your intricate new IHS.
Stop thermal paste buildup before it starts. I think that should be their tagline.
I pitched it to him. Well, not really. I just wrote this article, but here it is. You can see the thermal paste being applied, and you know what? It doesn't matter if it slides off the edges. And of course, Thermal Grizzly has one now too, which is like a silicone bib thing. It's a new product category. Who knew it was going to be a product category? You've got
and they're individually wrapped for your protection.
Well, that's the cleaning wipes, which they already sold anyway. I mean, this is not some new product.
Sure, it is.
But it has its own name. I love that. It's the NATPG1, which is a plastic thing. A thermal paste guard, I guess, is the new product category. And they even sell a bundle. You can get the NTH1 AM5 edition and the NTH2 AM5 edition.
Can we see the AM5 edition?
The AM5 edition, Brett, glad you asked.
Yeah.
It comes with the thermal paste. It comes with the cleaning wipes. It comes with the guard. It has it all. It has everything you need in one package.
This is like a black tie edition. This is great.
Yeah. I hope it comes in one of the really nice boxes too. They have excellent packaging.
I think presentation in something like this is really important.
No, you would, as the
Well, I mean, what else are you going to sell it with?
Of course. Come on.
Okay, Jeremy.
Do they make them for T-Rex, though? Because that is literally, the Threadrippers have been the only ones I've had trouble pasting lately, because holy crap, that's almost a playing card.
It is very big.
Well, don't you run out after that entire tube? You're like, man, I need another whole tube.
Depends on how many CCXs there are, because if you know where they are, you might only have to do 2 of them.
I do not miss playing around with Threadripper testing, because it's a mess. Because it's such a big surface, even if you're like carefully, thinning it out and like using a card or whatever, it's so much thermal
And then
paste.
one little scrape, and now you got to empty spots. You fix that.
There are a lot of LGA pens under that thing. You do not want to slop excess thermal paste anywhere in the vicinity of that socket.
I could sort of see that product having use for people that are like doing cooler testing on that platform.
Yes, absolutely.
Where you're, constantly putting on and taking off coolers and changing the paste.
God.
But for the person that's going to buy that motherboard and put a cooler on it and change it like twice in a 5-year period or whatever, I just don't understand it.
It's like they're taking a lot of time and trouble to make something for me, because it's something that just media. There's thousands of media out there who cover this stuff and test all this stuff, so they'll buy it.
All I'm doing is picturing someone with a bucket of thermal paste beside them, a drywall spreader, and that little bib. Yes. All right, that CPU is good.
Like laying bricks.
There we go. Done.
Like 4 boards in a row.
Don't they just use the graphite sheets like I do for testing?
It off.
And you don't have to.
I don't know if
worry
I
about
graphite
the
sheet Ryzen 7.
That makes way too much sense.
They're too toasty for that. Let's move on, because as Jeremy writes, PC purchases plummeted perilously. It's
19.5% compared to this time last year, and last year was not a good year for PC sales. So yeah, and this is the most precipitous plunge since the 90s, if you remember those. Some of you may not have been there. Some of you might have been actually paying attention to hardware. Even Apple is seeing a decline, but they're sort of the winners because they declined less than everyone else did. The two of the places that keep track of it, IDC and Canalys, pegged it at about 69 million units shipped, which is significantly lower than anyone was expecting. I mean, one of the hilarious things is that a lot of it is Windows 11. As a recent survey showed, there is more than 4 out of every 10 PCs lack the hardware to run it. And this is enterprise stuff, because Microsoft is still baffled why enterprise is not even glancing at Windows 11 and desperately disabling BitLocker and various other things so that they can prevent it from sneaking in. But they figured, no one's got the hardware to run Windows 11, so there's going to be a huge hardware refresh, and everyone's going to, wait, where is everyone? Why are they not buying hardware for our new operating system? This is confusing. I mean, there's also various economic factors going on right now, because at least you can say the supply chain is more or less back to what it used to be. And so you've just got this giant conflux of a bunch of people betting on Windows 11 doing hardware refreshes, so they poured a lot of money into it, which is not going anywhere. You've got the inflation and just the general lack of ability to go out and buy stuff on disposable income hitting them. And of course, there is also the fact that this is really going to hurt some of our friends. Like AMD suggests the sales figures that they were expecting for the coming quarter are going to be at least 1 to 1.2 billion under what they suggested. And considering last quarter was 6.5 billion, that's a good chunk of income right there. Intel is going to be seeing the same sort of thing. Dell, everyone, they're just seeing this giant plummet. So again, it's the last year of the PC, just like it was last year and the year before and the year before, and But not good news for investors, and not good news for people that really want companies to be able to make money so that they can develop new stuff. On the other hand, we might have some fire sales, and some fire sales would be good.
That could be.
I hope so.
And speaking of that AMD thing, they issued early financial results for Q3 and missing guidance by $1 billion. Quote, as client revenue craters, end quote. This is Ryan Smith at Anantech.
Yeah, well,
Craters is a good one.
They came late to the party due to very, very strong servers. They kind of insulated them a bit from the PC side, and plus their graphics side is not as robust as what NVIDIA has. Obviously, they don't make as much money there, and so they didn't have this huge inventory problem. But still, about 2 quarters after the weakness for NVIDIA and Intel showed, it's finally hitting AMD. They showed up late for the party, but they showed up with bells on. So.
Yeah, and we talked already about Intel and their guidance, but a few podcasts ago. But here we have a report at Ars Technica. This is not from Ars; it's from Bloomberg. But Intel allegedly planning its first major layoffs in almost 6 years. They could lay off like 1,000 or thousands.
They said thousands, and it won't be the mobile division because they're already gone.
And it's client that is hurting. Man, what a time to release Windows 11, because what's compelling about it? It's Windows 10 with a more Mac-looking skin over the top of it, and some kind of onerous stuff surrounding it, and the weird TPM
hardware restrictions,
or to storage, gaming storage, whatever the hell that is.
Yeah, but that was something they originally planned for Windows 10. They just pushed it to 11 to make it an exclusive, so you had a reason to upgrade.
Yeah,
and no, someone was bright enough to say, "Hey, we need to hold something back to convince people to upgrade."
The only people I know of that have gone to Windows 11 intentionally are people like me who got an Alder Lake and needed to use Windows 11 to take advantage of the E-Core P-Core difference. But that's something that Microsoft could have put into Windows 10, and we would have been perfectly happy, and that's why they didn't put it there. But yeah, once I actually get the time to write the article, there were a lot of things I had to do to Windows 11 just to get it where it wasn't a tremendous resource hog, even at a completely fresh install. It's not a compelling operating system, and if you've got Windows 10 and you don't have Alder Lake, stay on 10.
There's no.
I still haven't pushed my test machine to 11, though. I've got to. None of my other machines at home run it. So, but I think if I ever do a review again, you got to do it.
It's hard to feel like it's absolutely necessary when there are certain cases where 10 actually can perform better than 11, or at least that was the case a few months ago. And then all the devices that come out still have driver support for 10 along with 11. So any new motherboard, any new graphics card, anything, you can still run it with the latest and greatest software without being on Windows 11. So it's a tough sell. If it was one of those things where this hardware requires Windows 11, well then there's your push. But it's just there's been no real.
After all of the great reviews of Windows 11 you've put into the private chat, I mean, I can't believe I haven't leapt up there yet.
Yeah, it wasn't until I made an installer that could bypass the requirement to have a Microsoft account just to get the damn thing installed.
You're welcome.
I thanked you for it. That's why I decided, hey, I finally will upgrade the test platforms to Windows 11.
Oh, so now I'm supposed to be bad again.
Right. You are responsible.
Backhanded compliment. I love it. That's kind.
And of course, getting back to the sales of PCs falling, we are sort of an outlier in the PC marketplace. The majority of the consumers for PCs, they treat PCs more like a car or a refrigerator. You buy it and you use it until it doesn't work anymore. And then you go get a new one. And we saw in 2020, when the pandemic happened, a huge number of people went and bought new computers, new laptops, whatever. Sorry, my cat is moving my camera. Okay.
Rearranging your video.
A huge number of people went and bought new laptops, new PCs, webcams, whatever, because they were now working remotely.
Yep.
Well, they've still got those. They're 2 years old. What do they need a new computer for is their thought. So I think that's a huge part of why sales over the last 2 years have plummeted. It's because they were skyrocketing during the first year of the pandemic.
Let's pause here for a word from this week's podcast sponsor.
Have you ever heard the phrase lifelong learning, or you can learn something new every day? How would you like to put that into practice in your life? You can make Masterclass a part of that right now. With Masterclass, you can learn from the world's best minds anytime at your own pace. Whatever you're interested in, there's a class for you. From music or writing to business and style, technology, even sports and government. It's fantastic. Right now I'm taking a class on tactical empathy from Chris Voss, former FBI lead kidnapping negotiator, because everything in life is a negotiation of some type. You can learn the art and technique of cooking from Gordon Ramsay, or about astronaut training and space exploration from former ISS mission commanders. With over 150 classes from a range of world-class instructors, that thing you've always wanted to do is closer than you think. Hey, I just recently learned that great negotiation is really about great collaboration. I'm sure that'll come in handy later today. So go and explore the full library in the Masterclass platform and take lessons in any order across your phone, tablet, Apple TV, computer, or even on the go with an audio mode, from spaceflight to flights of fancy. I highly recommend you check it out. Get unlimited access to every class, and as a PC Per listener, you get 15% off an annual membership. Go to masterclass.com/PCPer. That's masterclass.com/PCPer for 15% off Masterclass.
We're back, and it's a story that's so nice we had to post it twice, because I did a story after watching the Twitch stream from TwitchCon, where Intel was there showing off some new hardware, and then Jeremy posted another news story about it with a better picture than mine. So Intel has taken the NUC from the original, what was the 5x5 concept, the next unit of computing, all the way up to these extreme units that take a full-size graphics card with dual slots. And now there's something that just looks like a standard mini ITX PC on this desk here. The largest NUC Extreme yet. It's the Ghost Canyon. No, not the Ghost Canyon. Not the Beast Canyon. It's Raptor Canyon. I guess.
Clever girl.
You beat me to it, Jeremy.
And by the way,
Well, you need more practice.
I
You gotta
have an
come on more
admission
often.
to make. This PC pictured here on this desk behind me is basically my primary PC, because it fits so nicely up on this tiny desk I have in our dining room. So all of my like family room computing when I'm writing up news posts and stuff is done on this NUC 11 Extreme with a full 3080 Founders Edition in it for those gaming moments. And it all works perfectly fine. There's no issue at all. So, like, what do you need beyond that? Well, how about triple slot graphics cards?
Dun, dun, dun.
So, I don't know if it's going to fit.
Even ARC?
Well, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, that's a 4090.
I think it'll fit a 4090.
I think it will too, but
Maybe
there's
not.
that whole issue of clearance. Is there enough clearance above it for the adapter?
Ooh, the height. And
But,
the
hey, there's
power
already-
takeoff.
At least one adapter, because Bauer keeps on showing his 90-degree power monitoring adapter. But here we have the next unit of computing, 13th gen monstrosity. You can see a lot of, it's very dark, but there's a lot of cooling fins here. It basically looks like a GPU at this point. And I'm assuming it's still a socket, like it was with the 12 Extreme. I'm sure the DIY audience will absolutely hate this, because you're big enough now with this latest NUC concept that it's as big as just a DIY PC. So,
But the thing is that it still is. Like, they're still using PC components in there.
yeah.
So you can pop out that CPU, you can pop out that RAM. My big question is it going to be more or less expensive, including the compute board, than buying yourself like a nice high-end mini ITX that could actually be smaller than this thing, by the way? Like, what's the price comparison going to be? Is it actually more price smart to buy the Raptor Canyon? or are you better off going on your own build? And I think that's going to be the deciding point there. Because if it comes at a huge premium, but we've designed it so that it's specifically for these tiny things. Like, yes, so did my mini ITX guy, and I've got some amazing cases to choose from. Yeah,
that NUC is much larger than the vast majority of ITX cases that are out now.
Oh, yeah.
There's
really
so many good ITX cases.
Yeah.
It's almost
13.9 liters. 14 liters, yeah.
Yeah, so it's big.
That's a lot of cola.
Yeah.
But
Sleeger's smaller. Cooler Master does one about the same size. That Meshlicious is smaller. And generally, they're a hell of a lot less.
Oh, wait,
yeah, you still got to buy your motherboard. Oh. Is that the Meshlicious?
Oh, nice. You picked that up instead of just going out to get more beer.
There's beer inside of it.
Yeah.
That's the
the handle.
Fantex. What is that one called?
That's the Shift XT.
That's right, okay.
Oh.
But that one does get bigger. That one shifts.
That is the full. That is at the highest.
Oh, that is already the
largest.
highest. Okay.
Bigger on the
largest
inside?
capacity.
How many liters is it fully extended?
I want to say it's right at 13.
It's a very personal question, isn't it?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you didn't have to answer, but I appreciate your candor.
Would you say inserting a Intel CPU would be like giving it the blue pill?
Ooh.
Well, there's
Speaking
a
of-
somebody asked-
12,600 there is a 12600K going into that, and a 3080 12 gig.
Someone from the chat asked what a NUC was anyway. It's a next unit computing? Was
You
it
know,
a
I'm
next
sure
one?
they were just mocking
Yep.
the way I pronounce it,
Oh.
right? Because there's some people
okay.
say NUC,
Oh,
and I've always just kind of said NUC, I think.
I've always heard it
NUC
as
is
NUC.
right.
The next
Yeah.
unit of computing. Intel was going to change the computing landscape forever. It's all going to these tiny things that have everything integrated into them, and it's, the world, Web 2.0, and didn't quite happen.
Yeah, and that
And the
tiny
NUC has
thing
gotten
is
bigger and bigger and bigger every
bigger.
year.
You can still get small ones. You can still get really
Yeah.
small ones. But if you want the graphics horsepower, you've got to get the Extreme. Although they do have the one in between, the Enthusiast one, which has like mobile graphics on the board with the CPU.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Microsoft, according to Bleeping Computer, support for Windows 10 21H1 ending in December. That's awfully close.
Yeah. You should probably upgrade to 22H1. Oh, wait. No, there is no 22H1, is there?
I think it's called Windows 11. I think the next build
Yeah, I
you
think it's
use
called Windows 11.
Just look, it's going to download itself.
Two more
anyway.
days. Supposedly in 2 days we get 22H2 for Windows 10. We'll see.
We have to talk about Arc. Josh is right. I forgot about this. Intel actually officially launched Arc. They picked the same day as the official launch
4090.
of the 4090. But yes, I saw
Hey,
Ryan
you
on.
could get 5 ARC cards for the price of a 4090.
So yeah, let's see.
Yeah. I mean, Ryan posted a quick snap of 2 cards being available, a 750 and then a ASRock 778 gig, but they were gone very, very shortly afterwards.
Yeah, it's not even a
Like
listing anymore.
seconds. Yeah.
Yeah, they had the ASRock partner models for
No,
a while.
do A770.
Okay.
Intel A770. Do it. See, there you go.
Oh, there's the out of stock stuff. Okay.
Mhm.
The Phantom Gaming Arc, only 8 gigs.
Yeah, it's the 8
$229.
gig, though.
I would want
Fancy
the 16.
fan.
I mean,
Absolutely. The 16 gig is the way to go.
Ryan
20
broke
bucks
my
for
heart
8
and not
gigs?
send me one. So
well, when
we've only been here for how many years?
when I was nagging him about it, the explanation that I got was that it was pretty limited with sampling. And I get that the bigger like YouTube channels, that sort of thing, would get it, but still disappointing. It's time for gaming quick hits. We got a couple of games tonight to look at as we cruise on closer to midnight on the East Coast. New Blood Interactive's coming game. I'm struggling with this title. So Blood Interactive is
it looks far out.
Okay.
But it looks Fallout, except
very much
a little less apocalyptic.
So isometric, old school graphics here. It looks software rendered.
But you've got one of the guys that worked on Project Van Buren, which of course never happened, but is a very good guy. Two of the guys that did the artists or the artistry for Fallout Sonora, and they grabbed Mark Morgan, the original composer for Fallout and Wasteland. So it's isometric, but the thing that they've done, and if you click on the 30-second video over at Rock Paper Shotgun, the combat switches from being isometric to being sort of a first-person style, not quite Final Fantasy, not quite Bard's Tale, but that sort of look to it. So you're looking, and they obviously have different distances from you, and it's a 30-second clip, so you can't tell much about it, but it looks pretty interesting. And some of the names behind it make me think that, hey, this could be my Fallout, not everyone else's Fallout. All right, I did enjoy some of the new ones, but 1 and 2 were really good. And they've got the whole Pip-Boy thing going, but if you jump to it about with 5-10 seconds left in it, oh well, there you go. So it looks like that. You know, like obviously there are squares delineated quite visually, so people approach you and back off. But I don't know. It looks interesting. It's releasing no time soon, is what they said. Oh. So congratulations for choosing this one, Brett.
You're welcome.
Well, this next one has Brett all over it because this is a humble bundle.
That's what I say.
There are no such thing as Skaven. It's literally everything.
All the Vermintide. All the Vermintide.
1 and 2, every DLC up to and including like just the cosmetic ones. But yeah, this is an impressive deal if you like going on a multiplayer survival type game. If you like Left 4 Dead, this is going to amuse you.
Yeah. And I think it's like $25. Oh, 18 for at least these 21 items. So it's under a $20 value. You can't even put gas in your car for $20 anymore.
That is a painful subject, Brett.
Well, you can, just not much.
No, it does not.
You might as well stay home. Stay home.
You might as well stay home. Download your gas. You wouldn't download a gas tank, would you?
I would. No. I would pirate the shit out of that. And now we move on to a review, not the 4090 stuff again. This is a beautiful snow white enclosure from Thermaltake.
With no red apple in it anywhere.
It's the.
I was going to mention this.
Now, by the way, the name of this product has the word "the" in it, so please understand. This is Thermaltake's The Tower 500 Snow, because the white version has a separate name and a separate URL. It's Thermaltake's The Tower 500 Snow vertical mid-tower case. So, how big is it, Kent?
It's a mid-tower, according to Thermaltake, but it is freaking huge. Yeah, that's a full-size 3070 Ti that is taking up almost no space inside there.
Okay, let's look at the specs for a second, because their claim of a mid-tower doesn't make any sense. It says mid-tower under case type, and then expansion slots 9. That is a full tower.
That is a full tower.
If it's the size of a full tower,
I believe they only call this the mid-tower because they actually have the big brother of this, the Tower 900.
Yep. You know what? Thermaltake, the last time I went to one of their booths at CES, they always had something like this, just this massive showpiece. So
they have always had an affinity for large cases. They used to have a model when I first got into building custom PCs called the Thermaltake Sword that was it was on casters.
Yeah.
It was huge. But this is monstrous. This is absolutely the largest case I've ever built in. But the thing is,
base?
no,
All that space and no 5 1/4 inch bays?
no
I know,
5
it's
and a
all
quarter.
glass.
Come on.
It's all glass, man. It's all glass.
No, it's not all glass. Look, there's some metal here.
There's
That's-
metal.
that's
Hey,
and
mesh.
Okay.
there's actually space if they had wanted to. They could have put honestly mini optical drive bays.
Either of these panels I'm looking at here on one of the sides, you could take this panel out and just put a bunch of 5 1/4 inch bays all the way down
So
here.
the panel that you're scrolling across there is actually fixed to the glass.
Oh.
Now you can flip that panel so that the mesh is toward the front side of the case instead of the back as it is.
This lower
there.
one comes out though, right?
The lower one does come out.
Okay.
Yes.
So we could put some drives there.
Behind the motherboard tray, there is absolutely a massive amount of space.
So this is the top view because it's a rotated layout, right?
It is a top
90
view, but a
degree.
rotated layout.
Okay. Is
Yeah,
this a PSU mount? Because there's a PSU mount at
No.
the bottom. Okay.
The PSU is at the bottom on the
What is
back
this
side.
frame for?
Brackets and fans and radiators. You can put a 240 radiator at the top.
So that again, it gives you some scale. This square is 120 millimeters.
Yes, that's correct. You can also put up to. You can't put a 280 radiator at the top,
No,
if I recall correctly, but you can put two 140 fans there.
but really, why would you want to put one at the top? I mean, that belongs in the front.
The thing with me in this case, I wish that it includes one set of brackets so you can put a 360 mounted to either the left or the right, 360 millimeter radiator.
Okay.
I wish that it had included two sets of those brackets because then you could put two 360s in it. As it is, it supports a massive amount of powerful hardware, but you're sort of limited to two 140s and a 360. You could do a really great custom loop in this, and I actually thought about doing a custom loop in it, but I really didn't have all the parts I needed at the time to do that.
Oh.
But it's got great cable management space. It's a really good case if you want a case that large that has that appearance. And that's sort of the ticket. It's different than anything else. You could build a great system to display and use this case to display it, I should say. It's really easy to build in, but you have to want a case like that, I think, is the big thing.
It's
not
very impressive.
something-
It looks like a showcase, like it's a cabinet.
Exactly.
for your
Exactly.
PC. Just put it in your
You could
dining
really
room.
build a-
Showcase.
Put it in your living room. People come over.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally. It literally is. Josh.
It's almost like a self-driving car.
It's the same. It's just exactly like that.
It's almost just like it.
Okay. Let's look at some performance numbers, Kent. Tower
So if you
thermals.
look,
How do you perform, Kent?
It does not include any case fans for the main chamber. There are two fans that sit behind the motherboard tray.
Yeah.
That the way Thermaltake describes it is they're used to pull heat away from the back of the motherboard. I don't really
Okay.
see how that's an issue.
Well,
But
it does
those are
provide
the-
flow through the case. It does provide a negative outlet,
Right.
and
so-
so that intakes from the bottom.
So what I did was I used the three Be Quiet Pure Wings fans that I've always used in the standardized airflow testing. Set them at 1,000 RPMs, two intake and one exhaust. And in that configuration at 1,000 RPMs, if you compare it with other cases that I've reviewed with those fans at 1,000 RPMs, the temperatures are actually very good. And also because of the design of it, and I think probably just because of the sheer size, it is a pretty quiet case. That's all going to depend on the fans you put in it, though.
Right.
But the temperatures were excellent. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that there's just such a huge interior volume. Plus, there's so much ventilation that heat's just going to sort of flow right out of this.
Yeah.
So if you're creating some movement of the air in there, the inside of it's just not going to get as hot as you would get from a smaller case.
There's a lot of ventilation, and I've always thought that the vertical design does better for graphics cards anyway, because you've got the natural convection, you've got, lots of ventilated, there's like perforated panels all over this thing.
And the graphics card temperatures were actually excellent with just that fan setup.
There's practically an open vent right next to the intakes.
Yeah. So that's good.
As I mentioned, it's very versatile. You can build it in a number of different ways, and once you decide on how you want to the system you want to put in it, it's really easy to build in because, as you could see from the photos, when you take all the panels off, it's almost like just building on an open chassis because it is so huge. I've never had as easy of a time plugging in the 8-pin CPU power as I did on this case.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, no cut
usually
knuckles.
those
How
are
about
ridiculous.
That? Yeah, it's and it performs well. You could build a great system in it. I did have a couple of issues with certain things. You can actually see it there. If you look at how far the I/O of the motherboard would be inset from the top of the case, there's this little almost canyon above that.
Yeah. That's not really a bad thing though for these, because sometimes it's the opposite issue where you have like your big display port cable and stuff protrudes out so far.
Well, except for the fact that if you've got to plug a wireless dongle into that and you've got a bunch of cables already in there, it's going to be a pain in the ass.
That's what you
could use an
extension USB for that, Kent.
Yeah. Not to mention the whole Faraday cage thing with the wireless dongle.
Yeah, don't put wireless adapters in.
Yeah.
Yes. This is for wired network users or people who put a wireless card on one of those little stands on top.
If you got really, really long antenna to stick out the back.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you don't. This is the problem with this, though. That's true, because a lot of motherboards have the antenna connectors on them now, and they come with just those, Not
I was speaking of just for wireless mice and keyboards, for instance.
Oh, okay.
True.
But there weren't many things that I just hated. The size and just the form factor and the footprint of it is huge. When I actually first got it, I looked at it and I was actually thinking of building my next personal rig in it, but there just wasn't space on my desk for it.
So you're anti under the desk? Is that what you're saying?
I am anti under the desk.
Okay.
If I put a closed loop in something, I want to look at it.
It's a great one of those sort of cases, looking at it all the time.
Absolutely.
It's almost like a showcase.
It is almost like a showcase.
Yeah.
It's almost like it, Josh.
If you are a custom builder and you want to go to a show and show off what you can do, this is a great case for that.
It also looks like a 3D printer housing.
Yeah.
I've seen 3D printers that look almost exactly like this.
That's
yes.
exactly
but did you measure
what
it out
said.
and will it fit a 4090?
Oh, yeah.
Namely the gigabyte one.
Oh.
I actually mention in the review, normally in my reviews, I use a digital micrometer I have and measure to the side panel to see how much CPU cooler clearance there actually is.
How big of a micrometer do you have to measure that out with a 4090?
Well, he doesn't want to brag,
From
but
the CPU cooler clearance. CPU cooler clearance to the side panel.
Side of the case, Josh. It's only this far.
I could not do that with this case because the micrometer does not extend far enough.
Yeah, the cooler height limitation is if that's a limitation, 275.
75 millimeters.
Yeah, that's high.
Have you noticed a hole in the market with 200 millimeter air coolers?
Yeah, Noctua is going to come out with the NDH20 that uses their 200 millimeter fans on it.
That's
perfect.
That's it exactly.
Actually, I want that now for the Ryzen platform.
Wouldn't that be
That'd be
perfect,
great.
though? It would be
great.
nice.
Yeah.
Yep.
The dimensions of the case, by the way, are about 24 inches, so it's 2 feet tall by about 15 inches by 15.3 by 15.7. So if you have a space for about a 16 by 16 footprint, you can get this in there.
You know, the funny thing is when I looked at that, I'm like, that's not that huge of a footprint. And then I actually looked at the case,
Well, it's
and
because,
those numbers
listen, Kent, I'm not trying to mansplain this to you, but you got the white version. White stuff always looks bigger. If you got the black one, you'd be like, no, I actually kind of like this. But it's the white, so it stands out. It looks like a mini fridge, and you just think it's too big. But 16 by 16, I mean, you don't have 16 by 16 on your desk? Get a bigger desk.
and
a stronger one,
speakers
because
I have.
apparently this case is 32.6 pounds on its own.
Yes.
Ooh, that's a hefty case.
But the price per
is
pound is
hefty.
good because it's only $179.99 when I looked on
But
Amazon.
there are some pretty large glass panels in it
$2 a
too,
pound,
which
less
makes
than
up a lot
$2
of the
a
weight.
It's cheaper than hamburger.
And I mentioned it in the review. I had a lot of trouble writing the review because I really like the case, but I also sort of hate the case. It's just too big.
Wait a minute. Were you writing an essay about marriage?
No, it was a complicated relationship.
Yeah.
It was a complicated relationship because it's a nice case. There are a lot of things I like about it. It's just if you're the person that you're the person that buys this case, you have to want this case.
You have to be into larger cases, and not everybody is.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But one of those that are.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And it's a really good case for that person.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my conclusion, and for that person, I gave it our silver award.
I reviewed the ITX version of this, the Tower 100, some time ago, and I've been gaming with it. It's back there in the corner. That little black cooler, that stack right there behind me, is that Tower 100 ITX version of this case, and I found it really great to build in. It's a nice display case. I don't have any lights in there. Using an air cooler, actually, in it on an older 8th gen CPU. No problems at all with cooling, but I overclock the crap out of it. That's great. I think it's a wonderful case. And the ITX version is, you're right, it's a lot different, but the ITX version does not take up a ton of room.
I think that case would fit inside the main motherboard compartment of the mid-tower version.
I have a
You should
question.
pull up a picture.
Is it larger than this?
Yes.
It is. Okay. Wow, it's actually bigger than a 4090.
It actually weighs more too.
Yeah, just a little bit.
6 times.
It's not much, but
Shall we move on to picks of the week?
It's getting late.
Yeah, it's getting great.
yes.
All right, well, Josh, get us started, please.
Me? Okay. Get on Amazon. Get the, if you've been holding off and you're underwhelmed by maybe not the performance, but the price of the new AMD 7000 series, which, again, performance is great, but motherboards costs are up and memory costs are up and the CPUs are, where they should be priced, but everything else about the environment kind of stinks in terms of price. But, look no further. And Ryzen 9 5900X for $334.99, otherwise known as $335. That's still a pretty good price for this. you're going to have less gaming performance than, say, a 7600X, but everything else is going to be twice as fast. Well, maybe not twice as fast, but it's going to be fast. And yeah, you can get a 570X or X570 based motherboard for under $200 easy. That will have all the features you need. That, if you were to get a new X670, it would cost about twice as much. So, if you're building a new board, memory prices on DDR4 are low. You can get 32 gigs of 3600 memory for about $100. And for something faster in DDR5, that's at least double that. Motherboard costs, everything. So yeah, this is a pretty amazing price per thread of a processor.
We're not talking.
But you'll miss out on all those PCIe 5.0 SSDs that are totally available for purchase right now.
But did I say 3900?
No, I'm saying that's the kind of price I would have expected to see, like a 3900X. Just a few months ago, but now we're getting the 5000 series for these discounted prices, and it's
we are.
It's fantastic because, like you were saying, the boards are cheap. B550 board, DDR4 memory, throw one of these processors in it,
and you've still got PCI 4.0 support. So we haven't seen PCI 5.0.
No.
So you've saved hundreds. You've saved hundreds, and you've given back how much in performance? 10%?
Not much.
20? 20 tops?
Not much.
All right. Jeremy.
So I succumbed to peer pressure, and I'm starting up on the hardware leaderboard again. And as usual, I start with the low end because it's actually one of the more interesting to do because you got to try and figure stuff out. And lo and behold, continuing in Josh's, and this is a Canadian price. The American price that I found on the leaderboard was a mere $130. But honestly, the coupon gives you an extra $10 off, so that's 160 Canadian, which is actually probably cheaper than 130 American. But yeah, the prices on the Ryzen 5 5600G are impressive until you compare them to the lower-end Core i3s and Core i5s from Intel, where they become amazing because they're not on sale right now. What I was sort of recommending was was an i5 that was, with significantly cheaper than the 5600 non-G, and has suddenly become 200 and change. So it's a pretty damn good deal if you're looking for something that you don't need to buy a discrete GPU for. Now, if you take a look at the low-end system, I actually found a 1660 Super for $200. And Josh, my 570 that I found, $150. So yeah, the prices are good at the low end. MSI X570A Pro. You're not missing out on anything with this. But you want a B660? $230 and up. So go last generation. So yeah, it's kind of worth it. And hey, if you're building for someone that isn't going to be spending $100, $200 on a GPU, the 5600G is pretty good for just browsing the web and doing what you need to do.
Excellent.
In Canada and the US.
Brett, your pick.
Three things collide on this particular pick. One is my love of widescreen. I've been pushing it for weeks. I think I'd like to see a widescreen on everybody's desk.
Well, there already is a widescreen on everybody's desk, but you're talking about ultra wide.
I'm talking about ultra wide screens. You're absolutely right. Thank you for the refinement of the correction. But the point is that I love the ultra widescreen format, and as Sebastian pointed out earlier today, is sort of a PC exclusive in that very, very wide aspect, very, very wide screens, and the curved nature of it, and all that.
Which is odd because it's so cinematic. You could actually watch
wonderful,
like those
really
235-to-1 Panavision movies without black bars.
Love it.
But does your TV streaming box support ultra wide resolution? Absolutely not. Your PC does, though.
So number one here is my love of the ultra wide format and aspect ratio. The second thing is that, as you probably noticed in Sebastian's review of the 4090, he did all of his testing at 3440 by 1440, ultra widescreen, 144, which is the very 144 hertz refresh. This is the very common refresh rate of a lot of these panels. My pick this week is yesterday's pricing on a 160 hertz refresh, 3440, 1440 ultra widescreen from LG, a reasonably reputable purveyor of these panels.
Well, yeah, considering they're the ones who make the panel that's in every other IPS ultra wide.
Exactly. But the important thing to note here is that everyone that was at 144 hertz previous to this is probably a very, very close kissing cousin of the very same piece of glass, very same panel.
Yes.
This is the 160. So this would be kind of like that next 1.5, not quite 2.0 generation step, that you want to see. But this is their next generation panel with refresh rates at 160 hertz. And I say yesterday's pricing, unfortunately, the supply chain and a lot of availability pushed the prices of these panels up into the mid threes, closer to the $400. So this $330 price range is getting down into what it was maybe a couple of years ago. I think this is a hot recommendation for people looking to get into ultra widescreen gaming.
And it's HDR10. Well, it's IPS, so whatever. At least it supports the higher color gamut. But AMD FreeSync Premium, and it has built-in speakers, 7 watts per channel, allegedly.
You could probably skip that one, but the 1 microsecond refresh rate is also a nice gimme as well.
Yeah, that's just like one shade of gray to one shade of gray. It doesn't really do anything.
Okay. Yeah,
it's IPS. It's not the highest performing panel type, but it does look nice.
160 hertz IPS. That's probably going to be.
I would like to see some high-speed photography of.
You'd probably want to run it at 144.
Yeah, because you'd be able to
I run my
160.
I run my 144s at 120, so fair point.
There you go.
Hey, speaking of displays, Kent has a pick.
Speaking of the highest performance type of panel, I have picked this panel before when it was on sale for $799. It is on sale for $799 again, but there is now a $200 mail-in rebate on it. So this is a 48-inch 4K OLED 120 hertz with FreeSync Premium gigabyte panel. And at that price, that is a steal for OLED.
No argument here. That is cheap. Getting one of these for $1,000 was a deal just a year or so ago.
Too bad I'm poor.
Yeah. No, because otherwise you wouldn't be here.
Yeah. Got to check those lottery tickets.
All right. Well, on that note, let us say goodbye. Josh, do you have an outro in your system for us?
I don't know. Why does anybody have an outro in their system? Why would they want to say goodbye to such fine people like you? You listeners, you viewers, you people who transcribe things for strange reasons known only to yourself. But alas, all good things must end, and happily some bad things also end, and I'm not entirely sure which area we're in, but it's one of them. And for us, to you, we would like to say good night.